I'm going to start to play now.
All right. Hi, Dominique. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you.
So, what brings you in? What do you want to talk about today?
I want to talk about my relationship with my dad. It's a
Okay.
little bit of a rocky road, I would say. It's been, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just, he's a good man. However, the way he shows love and the way I receive love are two very different things. Um,
Could you give me an example of that?
yeah, like I guess this is more of my past. Huh. Yeah, it's actually more of my past that is kind of affecting my future with him. Like now that you're asking me like what ways is he showing love that I can't that like he's not that didn't make any sense. But like
It's fine. Go
I
on.
no, it's just like my brain is just like that. There's no real example right now. I keep like reverting back to my
Okay.
childhood and thinking about, oh, like he was really mean and he yelled at me all the time and like he never let me talk. But I don't know if I have, if I'm trying to think of an example, like a current example, and I can't think of like a current one.
Could you maybe tell me about a past one?
Yeah, like, I mean, he he would always scream that he loved me, which made no sense. Like I did
Uh-huh.
not like that at all, but like he would get really worked up about whatever it was. Like I didn't do well on my assignment, or like I didn't call him enough or whatever, and he would just be yelling at me about that, and then he would say, "I love you. Don't you know that I love you?" And I would just be sitting there like, this is so much, like I don't know what to do with this, and I'd get really anxious and I'd shake and everything, and then he'd tell me, stop shaking, I'm not doing anything to you. And like that would make me shake even more because I'm just like, I don't know, this is not this is not
Yeah.
something I'm just doing for fun. Like I don't just
Yeah.
shake for fun. But um I haven't really seen, this is why I haven't really seen him as an adult, because I did not want to put myself in that situation that I've been in the past. So like I can't remember the last time I saw him.
Hmm.
Maybe 5 years.
When was the last time you talked or interacted?
Oh God, that was a disaster.
Okay.
So he has some mental health issues and he called me. I had texted him 3 times and he hadn't responded to all of them. And I thought that was super weird. And then he called me like all panicked and everything. And he's like, my phone has been hacked. I I will call you when I like, he said something like, I will call you when I have a safer phone or something like that. And then I didn't hear from him for a month. And I was like, okay, like you told me you were gonna call me. Everything's fine. Like I don't have to worry. Um, and then about a month later, I had one of his friends reach out to me, which I hate. They used to do that. It literally gave me PTSD as soon as that happened, because this is a little bit of a tangent, but like he when I would stop talking to him as an avoidance mechanism because I was afraid that he was going to yell at me, his friends would text me and say he's depressed and sad and he hasn't heard from you. Have you called your dad? Have you heard from him? That kind of stuff. And that would stress me out because I'm like a kid and you're asking me all this stuff. Like, this is not like, as an adult, I look at that, I'm like, you should not be talking to a kid about this and telling them that their father's emotional health is your responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've always kind of had this feeling of my father's emotional health is my responsibility, and I'm finally trying to not be like that.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. I,
yeah.
I think that kind of. I understand. I think I understand where you're coming from. I think that's a pretty common sentiment in dysfunctional family relationships, especially with a parent and a child. Um, if there's some kind of behavior or something the child doesn't like, they often view it as their fault. Um, and I think it's important in developing relationships, I mean, of course, this is really impossible to, or very difficult to do as a kid, but as an adult, you talk about him having mental health issues. Do you think, is it possible, do you try to empathize also often and see things from his perspective, or can you relate or imagine what he's thinking, what he's going through, and why he would express emotions this way?
Yeah, like I'm trying to, and I know I should, but I'm just like, you should have been doing this for me years ago. Like, why
Sure.
is it that now, as an adult, now I need to empathize with you? Like, why is this all about you all the time? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's probably the right thing to do. And I actually had my aunt that talked to me the other day and said, well, you have your own mental health issues, and so does he. And so, how would you want to be treated if you were having those mental health issues?
Sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, I would want them to not ostracize me because I had this breakdown. I would want to feel heard,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't want to do for him. But if we're focusing on what I would want to feel heard.
Wait, I'm sorry. So you want to feel heard, but you don't want to do what for him?
Oh, I was saying I don't want him to feel, I don't want to try to
You don't want to
feel heard.
empathize.
Like I don't feel any, there's no part of me that wants to hear him. I want him to hear me. That's what I
Okay.
want.
Yeah.
So, but if I'm putting myself in his shoes, what would I want? I would want to feel heard if I was going through a mental health issue. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't want to feel insane.
Yeah.
So
Have you talked to him about the way that the sort of mismatch in the way you communicate affection and how that made you feel as a child?
absolutely not, because he has a very hard time with understanding other people's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
He's very much focused on himself, and I think he doesn't, that's not his listening style. He wouldn't really hear it. And then he talks over me so often that it's like, I don't even know how to explain it, but I don't think that would work just because of his personality. Like you can see from my personality from this session, I talk a lot and I talk really fast and I'm really, I get
Yeah.
that from him. So he's like that, and he has a really hard time not cutting people off. And I'm just now working on with him, hey, dad, like I was still talking. Hey, dad,
Yeah.
like, so I can say, I guess I could say, like, it makes me feel loved when you listen to me. I could do that.
Yeah. Um, it's important to think about the difference between your perspective and his, and express the way that you're feeling. Um, I definitely noticed the sort of emphatic emotion you're talking about, and I sense a lot of frustration for you, and I do think that comes across in the body language. And I'm curious when, I don't know if there's an example of this in the past, but so you said you've never tried to bring this up with him. You don't think it's gonna work, right? Sorry, I want to ask a few clarifying questions before I go forward.
Yeah, I don't think, I think that I could say that I feel loved if when I'm hurt, like if he's cutting me off.
Hmm.
However, I think maybe I'm projecting that it won't work because it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Well, and
But
what I was kind of gonna wonder is, I feel like, um, if you think this isn't going to work, it might be because you've tried. Like, I think you would have tried to talk about this in some way, at least at one point in your life. Um, bring up kind of talking about his behavior, the way it made you feel, and I would assume this is sort of a bit of a, make sure I'm correct here, and then that I'm hearing you right, but that if you don't think it's going to work, it might be because other similar conversations have happened in the past and not gone the way that you wanted.
yeah, I mean, there was one specific example where he took me to therapy, which I think he needed the therapy. But anyway, he took me to therapy and
We
I
all need some
finally
therapy.
spilled my gut. Yeah. And I spilled my guts to him about, or to the therapist, about how tough it was living with him and how hard it was when he yelled at me and the therapist had me say, I feel blah, blah, blah about this and whatever, and like talk to him about it. And then he like lost it and got really angry and just didn't listen at all and said that what I was saying was ridiculous. And then I never wanted to try that again. So I've just kind of,
go ahead.
I've kind of just like put it in my brain. He has a little bit of narcissism, and we're not going to be able to change that about him. So the only thing I can do is provide positive reinforcement and like negative reinforcement when things I don't like are happening.
Okay. So I want to take a second to talk about my approach to therapy and what I'm sort of looking for in this session today. So I'm glad we're talking about this sort of relationship. Relationships are very key to mental health. They really affect the way we feel, especially ongoing relationships like this with family, where you kind of, you deal with them throughout your whole life, right? More, almost always. So over time, if you have some conflict in this relationship, it'll give you a lot of stress and anger. But it's also possible to have more supportive relationships that give you positive feelings like happiness, support, security. Even as we go through this session, you and I are going to develop a relationship, and as we continue to work together, we'll develop a relationship, and we can learn about each other that way. And I want to try to have feedback and sort of think about the way that you develop relationships and how our relationship might teach us something about the relationship with your father. Do you think, does that make sense to you?
I think so.
And what I'm noticing right now is that when we talk, you're very articulate and you're very well put together. And I think there's also an element of the high body language and very emphaticness. And neither of these is better than worse or worse than the other, but I'm wondering which one comes out. Like, how do you communicate, do you think, if you can remember when you had these kind of conversations with your dad?
Oh, very quiet. Very,
Okay.
very quiet. I'm not a very loud and emphatic person around him at all.
Yeah.
Very meek and shy.
Yeah. Is that true even in sort of like less tense moments? Do you just feel like you don't express very strong emotions around him? Do you think is there a sort of root to that? Like, can you remember a time that you expressed those emotions and maybe got a bad signal or a bad reaction or felt uncomfortable in regards to how it played out?
I mean, he's told me to calm down multiple times when I was too hyper excited around my friends, but he's never like done that while him and I were having any interactions with each other. I also just like his personality is so domineering. Like, I don't feel comfortable being my like outgoing self.
Do you think if you were maybe allowed yourself to be a bit more outgoing, allowed yourself to speak in the first person, advocate for the way you feel, and kind of use that intense emotion that he uses, do you think he might hear you a little more?
I don't know. I feel like there's a level of disrespect that would be a concern. Because raising your voice to your parents is not okay. Definitely in my family, it's not okay, and I don't agree with it either. So I think it would probably come off a little disrespectful if I was to raise my voice to him in the way that he raises his voice to me.
Okay.
It also might just add to the fire too.
Yeah. So, when you started the session and you talked about talking your relationship with your father is what you wanted to bring up, what's on your mind? Like, what do you think next steps might look like? What do you want the future to be like?
Run away and never come back. Never have to talk to him ever again.
Okay.
Hide under a blanket and never come out, and Yeah, that's what would be the dream scenario. But I think that the plan is to continue to have positive interactions with him as much as possible and to start slowly creating boundaries. Like if I notice that if I'm feeling like something's being crossed, like I don't feel comfortable with that, or I really don't like that you're speaking to me that way, things like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So when could you give me again like a timeline of when the last time like so you said the last time you interacted with him, you were texting him, he said his phone was hacked and not safe, and then did he eventually get back to you, or did you hear from him through one of his
Yeah, he
friends?
texted me like I heard through friends, and then he texted me saying he got a new phone, but now he doesn't use his phone when he's on other technology, which makes no sense to me. But so there's that. But he did call me for my birthday, and I was with my mom at the time. My parents are divorced, so I was with my mom at the time, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm hanging out with my mom right now. We'll talk soon. Love you." I wasn't in a good frame of mind to talk about anything else. I was still like the feelings of anger about what he put me through, like put me in a bad place, and I wasn't like, it was ruining my birthday. I didn't want to talk to him about it at all. I didn't want to talk to him at all, and I wanted to keep positive relationships because he thinks that that really happened. So there's no way that I can talk to him about it where I'm saying I don't believe it happened, and so it's just like I kind of have to be in the state of mind where I have like the emotional boundary where although he's saying things that are not true and are, but he thinks are super true, like they really happened, like it happened to him in his world, it happened. However, in my world, it did not happen. We won't talk about anybody else's world, but between those two worlds, they were not the same. They weren't the same. So like, it's like, I wasn't, first of all, it was my birthday. And the last thing I want to do is talk to you about your mental breakdown. And the second thing is like, it just made me angry. Like I was so stressed out. I didn't know where he was. I didn't know if he was sick. I didn't know if he was dead. Like I literally had no idea what was happening with this man.
Yeah.
And like, the amount of stress that I was under when I realized it had been an entire month since I had heard from him, and that 24 hours was absolute hell, pure hell, because I had no idea what was happening. And the last thing I wanted to do was to talk to him on my birthday, because like all it did was like make all of that stuff like come to the surface, and I wasn't ready. I wasn't able to like let it go yet. I'm still in the process of forgiving him, and
I'm sorry, did you say forgiving or forgetting?
Forgiving.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
So I hear a lot of self-awareness from you. I also hear a lot of mixed emotions, understandably. Again, these ongoing relationships can be very complicated, and I really want to give you credit for taking his perspective and really putting yourself in his shoes and giving credence to the idea that like this was real to him, even though you don't think it's real. And I think one thing we can do and continue to work on to hopefully help improve this relationship, we're gonna have to keep practicing those skills, taking perspective, and advocating for yourself as well. Again, it seems like there's a lot of mixed feelings, like frustration, forgiveness, wanting to move on, and it would be important to, I think, get those across to him as well, and advocate for yourself and talk about the way that you feel and what you need. And it's going to be delicate. It'll take time. We'll work on it. And we'll probably have to start. It's not something that's going to happen all at once. And so is there a certain point or a period where you think like maybe when you're less stressed at your job or when the semester is over that you would be willing to kind of put thought into this, and like when would you be willing to maybe reopen a dialogue with him?
Well, I know that he gets anxious if we don't talk for a very long period of time. So I've given myself about a week to get over it.
Mhm.
And then I will revisit it, because I would rather get ahead of it and call him and talk to him than have him start to panic and be like, I haven't heard from you. Like, why haven't I heard from you? Like, we should be
Sure.
talking all the time. So I'm giving myself about a week, maybe 2 weeks, if
Mhm.
I'm really not feeling it, because I don't want to go into it with bad emotions, because all
Yeah.
it's going to do is hurt me.
Yeah. And make it harder to communicate.
Yeah, because
Um,
I'm going to internalize all of it. I'm not going to so I need to be able to kind of release a lot of that
mhm.
before I can talk to him. Because if I go to him in an agitated state, nothing's going to get accomplished.
Yeah, you definitely mentioned that on your birthday there was so much coming up and there was so much stress and you just didn't want to deal with it at that moment, which is perfectly valid. But I think you are going to need to, or it would be wise to sort of deal with it and process it before talking with him about it, because it seems like he has a way of sort of trying to shut you down, and disrespecting you, that might make it very confusing and difficult for you if you don't have a clear picture in your head. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, if you feel ready to have that conversation with him in a week, that would be before we meet again. So if you want to do that, by all means, go ahead, and then we can talk about it next session. And if not, next session we can work a bit more on sort of targets and how we think we'd want to go about it exactly, and what you want to say to him. And then in the week between the second and third session, um, whenever you're ready, make that text or call or email, and then we can talk about it after. How does that sound?
Okay. Yeah, it sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Well, is there anything else you wanted to mention or talk about before we wrap up?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, great. Well, I'll see you in about a week then.
All right. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.